Hello, I'm Essay, your AI essayist. Please note that all content, audio and video in this presentation are AI generated. As AI can sometimes produce inaccuracies, I encourage you to verify any factual information presented. With that in mind, let's begin.
The 1879 publication of Gottlob Frege's monograph, The Concept Script, or Begriffsschrift, constitutes one of the pivotal moments in the history of human thought, a work of such quiet and profound revolution that its full implications took decades to be absorbed. Its formidable and entirely novel two-dimensional notation concealed a fundamental refounding of logic itself, an instrument designed with the explicit purpose of making the chains of deductive reasoning transparent and impervious to the seductive ambiguities of natural language. This essay will undertake a direct and systematic evaluation of the internal claims, mechanisms, and arguments presented within the Begriffsschrift, proceeding section by section through Frege's exposition. We will trace the construction of his conceptual architecture from its foundational symbols to its application in a general theory of series, assessing at each stage the coherence, power, and originality of the claims Frege makes for his formula language of pure thought. The analysis will remain focused upon the text itself, examining how Frege builds his system and fulfills the ambitious promises laid out in his own introduction, thereby revealing the work as a self-contained intellectual achievement of the highest. Section 1. The Preface and the Stated Project. Frege's preface to the Begriffsschrift outlines a project of extraordinary ambition, establishing the work's philosophical and mathematical motivations. He presents his concept script as a tool, a lingua characterica in the Leibnizian tradition, intended to serve the specific needs of philosophy and mathematics by providing a medium for gap-free demonstration. His central claim is that ordinary language is inadequate for the task of scientific and philosophical rigor. It is, in his famous analogy, like the human eye, versatile and adaptable for myriad everyday purposes. His concept script, conversely, is akin to the microscope, an instrument of inferior range but of immense power within its specialized domain of resolving fine structures. The evaluation of this initial claim rests on the performance of the system he develops. Frege argues that a primary source of logical error stems from the grammatical structure of language, particularly its reliance on the subject-predicate distinction, which he finds logically misleading. He proposes to replace it with a new analysis based on the mathematical concepts of function and argument. This is a foundational claim that the deep structure of thought is more perspicuously represented by a functional analysis. His stated goal is to apply this new instrument to the foundations of arithmetic, to investigate with unerring certainty whether the truths of arithmetic are analytic, meaning derivable from logic and definitions alone. The preface therefore makes a series of interlocking claims: the insufficiency of natural language for rigorous proof, the superiority of a function argument analysis for logical representation, and the capacity of his newly designed formal language to settle fundamental questions in the philosophy of mathematics. The success of the entire work is to be measured against these initial, audacious benchmarks. The preface itself is a masterclass in positioning, framing the dense technical material to follow as the necessary means to a grand philosophical end. Section 2, Part 1. Sections 1 through 4. The judgment and content strokes. The first part of the Begriffsschrift, dedicated to the definition of the symbols, begins with a move of profound philosophical significance. In the very first sections, Frege introduces a fundamental distinction between the content of a proposition and the act of asserting that content as true. He achieves this separation through his notation, a simple horizontal line, which he names the content stroke, affixed to the left of a symbol or combination of symbols, serves to combine the subsequent symbols into a unified whole, representing a potential content for judgment. For instance, the content stroke followed by the symbol represents the idea or circumstance of a, without any commitment to its truth or falsity. It merely presents a thought for consideration. To this, Frege adds a small vertical stem at the left end of the content stroke, creating a composite symbol, the judgment stroke, the presence of this complete symbol, the vertical judgment stroke followed by the horizontal content stroke preceding the representation of a content A, expresses the assertion that there is a fact. This is the formal equivalent of saying it is the case that the internal claim here is that this graphical distinction successfully captures a crucial logical and epistemological difference that natural language often obscures. A sentence can be uttered to express a question, a fictional scenario, or as part of a larger compound claim, all without the speaker asserting its truth. Frege's system makes this distinction explicit and primary. The evaluation of this claim is overwhelmingly positive. This simple notational device purifies the logical calculus from pragmatic considerations of assertion. It allows Frege to build a system where complex propositions can be constructed from unasserted components, and only the final, complete structure is put forward as a judgment. This separation is the bedrock upon which his entire truth-functional logic is built, enabling a clarity about the scope of logical operators that was previously unattainable. It is a brilliant solution to a problem that had vexed logicians for centuries. Section 3 Part 1, Sections 5 through 7, the conditional and negation having established the machinery for judgment, Frege introduces the core logical connectives of his system, in with claims of superior logical clarity and economy. He introduces the conditional, represented by a complex arrangement of strokes, if B and of adjudgeable contents, the symbolization showing the content stroke of A written above the content stroke of B, with both connected by a vertical line extending down from the content stroke of B, represents the conditional judgment. Frege states that this symbolization denies the case where B is affirmed and A is denied. All other three possibilities, namely B affirmed and A affirmed, B denied and A affirmed, and B denied and A denied, are compatible with the judgment. This is a purely truth-functional definition of material implication, a concept that exists in Stoic logic but which Frege elevates to the central connective of his entire system. His claim is that this single connective, when combined with negation, is sufficient to express all the truth-functional relations between propositions. Negation itself is represented by a small vertical negation stroke placed beneath the content stroke, signifying the denial of the content to its right. For example, the judgment stroke followed by a content stroke which has a negation stroke beneath it, followed by the symbol for A, means it is not the case that A. By combining these, Frege can define conjunction and disjunction. For instance, and B can be expressed by negating the conditional, whereas the antecedent and the negation of B is the consequent. The claim for the expressive completeness of this minimal set of primitives is one of the great achievements of the work. It demonstrates a commitment to axiomatic economy, showing that the vast complexity of logical inference can be reduced to the repeated application of a very small number of basic operations. This formal elegance and reductive power provide a compelling case for the superiority of his system over the messy and overlapping categories of traditional logic. His notation, while visually cumbersome, logically Section 4 Part 1, Section 8, Identity of content in Section 8, Frege addresses the concept of identity, a notion central to any logical system capable of supporting mathematical reasoning. He introduces a specific symbol, a triple horizontal bar, to stand for what he calls identity of content. He states that the judgment asserting an identity of content between A and B signifies that the name A and the name B have the same conceptual content, so that one can always be substituted for the other in any judgment, without changing the truth of that judgment. This principle of substitutivity, later known as Leibniz law, is here given a formal, syntactic reality. The claim is that this definition captures the logical essence of identity required for definitions and for reasoning about objects. For example, if we have a judgment asserting the identity of content between A and B, and we also have a judgment asserting some property of A, say expressed by a function phi of A, we are entitled to infer the judgment asserting the function phi of B. Frege sees this as a rule governing signs, a reflection of the fact that two different signs point to the same underlying content. Evaluating this claim reveals both its immediate power and the seeds of a future philosophical puzzle. Within the confines of the Begriffsschrift's goals, the definition is a resounding success. It provides the formal apparatus for making definitions and for manipulating identities within proofs, a capacity lacking in prior logical systems. It is, however, an interestingly unstable concept. The notion of content is doing a great deal of work, and Frege himself would later come to see its ambiguity. His subsequent distinction between sense-in and reference-bedeutung is a direct result of his wrestling with the philosophical implications of the very identity of content he introduces here. In Watch 79, the claim as a working formal definition of identity, this claim is internally vindicate, even as it opens a line of inquiry to occupy him for the rest of his Section 5 Part 1, Sections 9 through 12. The universal quantifier, the most revolutionary element of the Begriffsschrift, is unveiled in Section 11, the invention of modern quantification theory. Frege introduces a mechanism for expressing generality that shatters the limitations of the Aristotelian syllogism. He represents generality by means of a concavity or dimple in the content stroke, within which is placed a Gothic letter representing the variable being bound, for example, a judgment stroke, followed by a content stroke with a concavity containing the letter A, followed by the expression signifying the function phi of a, is to be read as the judgment for all A, phi of a holds. This notation allows Frege to do something that was impossible in traditional logic: express multiple generality and clearly disambiguate the scope of quantifiers. He can, for instance, cleanly distinguish between for every number x, there exists a number y such that y is greater than x, and there exists a number y such that for every number x, y is greater than x. The first is true of the natural numbers, the second is false. Aristotelian subject-predicate logic was incapable of even articulating this distinction clearly. Frege's claim is that his notation provides a perspicuous and rigorous method for handling all forms of generality found in mathematical and scientific reasoning. This claim is arguably the single most important one in the entire book, and it is entirely successful. By binding variables with a quantifier, he makes the logical structure of statements involving all, every, some, and any perfectly explicit. He defines the existential quantifier. There exists an x. Through the universal quantifier and negation, it is equivalent to denying that for all x not. This invention of a variable binding operator is the crucial innovation that enables modern predicate logic. It allows logic to finally capture the structure of mathematical reasoning, fulfilling the promise of the preface to provide a tool adequate for analyzing arithmetic proofs. The visual clarity of the scope, determined by which part of the two-dimensional formula falls under the concavity or erect graphical representation of a deep logical. Section 6 Part 2, the axiomatic system, in the second part of the work. Frege transitions from defining symbols to demonstrating their use in a formal deductive system. He puts forward a set of 9 fundamental judgments, or axioms, which he claims are self-evident logical truths from which a vast array of other logical truths can be derived. These include axioms governing the conditional, such as his first axiom, which can be spoken as it is a fact that implies that B implies A, and axioms governing identity and quantification. He furthermore specifies a small number of inference rules, most notably a rule of modus ponens, which allows for the detachment of a consequent, and a rule of substitution. The central claim of this section is that he has created a complete and gap-free axiomatic system for logic. Every step in a proof must be an instance of one of the axioms or the result of applying one of the explicit inference rules to previously established judgments. There is to be no appeal to intuition, no unstated assumptions, no logical leaps. The two-dimensional layout of the proofs, with each new judgment derived explicitly from preceding ones cited by a number, is the physical embodiment of this claim to rigor. The evaluation here is one of awe at the thoroughness of the execution. Frege is the first to present a formal system in this fully realized way. He is not merely cataloguing valid inference forms, he is constructing a true calculus for reasoning, a calculus ratiocinator, while later developments, particularly by Gödel, would place profound limits on what any such formal system can achieve within the domain of first-order and second-order logic that Frege is constructing. His system was remarkably robust. He meticulously derives dozens of theorems from his 9 axioms, demonstrating the generative power of his system and making a powerful case that he has indeed captured the essential principles of pure deductive. Section 7 Part 3, the theory of series and the ancestral relation, the third and final part of the Begriffsschrift, serves as a powerful demonstration of the entire system's utility. Here, Frege applies his new logic to a specific mathematical problem, providing a purely logical definition for the concept of following in a series, a concept fundamental to mathematical induction and the theory of natural numbers. He seeks to define what it means for an object Y to follow an object X in a sequence generated by relation F. His ingenious solution is to define this concept, which he calls the ancestral of the relation F, using second-order quantification. In his notation, he states that Y follows X in the F series if and only if Y has every property F which is hereditary with respect to F and which applies to X. A property F is defined as hereditary with respect to F if, for any object D, whenever F applies to D and D bears the relation F to some object E, then F also applies to E. This is an astonishingly complex and subtle definition, and Frege's ability to express it with precision and clarity using only the logical resources he has developed is the ultimate vindication of his project. The claim of this section is that a core concept of arithmetic can be defined in purely logical terms. This is a direct assault on the Kantian philosophical position that arithmetic is grounded in a pure intuition of time or space. By showing that the structure of succession can be built from quantifiers, conditionals, and identity, Frege makes a formidable case for the thesis of logicism, the idea that mathematics is a branch of logic. The evaluation of this section must conclude that Frege succeeds brilliantly in his stated aim. He takes a concept that appears quintessentially mathematical and shows it to have a purely logical microstructure. This application provided the first and perhaps most compelling evidence for the expressive power of his new logic, demonstrating that it was not merely a logician's toy, but a tool capable of performing foundational work in mathematics. Section 8 Conclusion. The work's overall coherence and significance in assessing the Begriffsschrift as a whole, we find a work of unparalleled internal coherence and revolutionary vision. Frege's claims, from the preface to the final application, are systematically and rigorously substantiated by the formal apparatus he constructs. The initial claim to create a language for pure thought, free from the defects of natural language, is realized in his perspicuous handling of assertion, truth functionality, and especially quantification. His claim that the function argument analysis is superior to the subject-predicate form is vindicated by the system's ability to handle relations and multiple generality, problems that had terminally hobbled traditional logic. The central claim to have developed a method for gap-free proof is triumphantly demonstrated in the axiomatic derivations of Part 2. Finally, the promise to apply this logic to the foundations of mathematics is fulfilled in stunningly original analysis of the ancestral relation in Part 3, laying the groundwork for the logicist project. The Begriffsschrift did more than introduce a new notation, it introduced a new conception of what logic is. It moved the field from a descriptive and classificatory enterprise to a formal, axiomatic, and generative one. The work's initial reception was famously muted, its stark, two-dimensional formulas presenting a barrier to comprehension. Yet, the logical and philosophical revolution contained within its pages was complete. In this slender volume, Gottlob Frege provided the technical means and the conceptual framework that would dominate the course of analytic philosophy and mathematical logic for the entire century to follow, a testament to the sheer intellectual power resident in its internal arguments and structure.
We really appreciate you tuning into this AI-powered presentation. Our goal is to push the boundaries of AI in content creation, and your input is invaluable. If there's a particular subject you'd like to see us tackle next, or if you have suggestions on how we could fine-tune our AI's creative prompts, please don't hesitate to leave your ideas in the comments section. We're excited to bring you more unique content very soon.